Welcome to Conversations with Doc Martin. This video series focuses on extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. Please don't forget to hit subscribe and click the notifications so you don't miss out on our next guest. Today, we're joined by Sean Swarner, a philanthropist, author, and keynote speaker. He's a two-time terminal cancer survivor who's dedicated his life to helping others reach their full potential. Sean created Cancer Climber with his brother in 2001, a nonprofit organization that pays for and travels with cancer survivors to climb Kilimanjaro. Sean's passion for climbing and adventure blossomed after becoming the first cancer survivor to summit Mount Everest. Since then, he's climbed all 7 summits and skied to both North and South Poles, making him the first cancer survivor and one of only 56 people in the world to complete the Explorer's Grand Slam. His final trip to complete the Grand Slam was to the North Pole, in which a team followed him and chronicled the experience in a documentary called True North. If that wasn't enough, he's also completed the World Championship Hawaii Ironman as well. Not, busy nearly enough. And last but not least, Sean in 2018 was voted as one of the top 8 most inspirational people in history and was the recipient of the Don't Ever Give Up Award presented by the Jimmy V Foundation and ESPN. So Sean, welcome to you. Thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure, man. That was quite an intro. I'm sitting there thinking, wow, I want to listen to this guy.
Well, for all our viewers out there, Sean and I are friends. We met a number of years ago now when we were both training to be coaches, and I'll tell a little story about that a little bit later. But you are truly one of the most inspirational people I have ever met. Knowing you, watching your documentary, reading your book, Keep Climbing, which I'll talk about in another video. I was sitting there reading the book, and I knew kind of the end of the story, so to speak, because we know each other, and I'm like bawling like a baby, and I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? So let's unpack this a little bit. I know that you've had some kind of recent news that isn't the best news either. So why don't we kind of talk about that, and then let's talk about your background and how you're so inspiring to so many people around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I know earlier, before we actually before you hit record, we were talking about how we were going to bring it up. We're like, let's just bring it out. Let's just throw it out there and make it happen.
Yeah.
So I'm first of all, I'm down in Puerto Rico. My wife's Puerto Rican. Mm-hmm. We're turning her house into an Airbnb. It's 3 blocks from the beach. If anybody wants to come to Puerto Rico.
I love it. I already told you I'm there. I'm there.
Right. So while we were driving across, we live in Colorado. While we were driving across the country to Tampa, Florida, to go visit my 98-year-old grandma, we did that to be safe, to make sure it was just the 2 of us quarantined in there driving down. It took us a week and a half, I think, just took our time. I got a phone call from my dermatologist, and she told me that I'd been diagnosed with my 3rd cancer. Jokingly, I know the video you're talking about on Facebook and all my social media platforms, jokingly, kind of tongue in cheek, and like, well, I guess I'm an overachiever. I need to go for one's not enough. I went for 2. I had to go for 3. But we're trying to schedule the best time to go back home so we can just do a quick surgery. They don't know how deep it is yet until they get in there.
Right.
And initially, I was just I lost it. I wept because it just brought back so many traumatic memories from the first 2 cancers, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Sure.
But the good news is the doctors say, if this is the cancer you're going to get, this is the one that you want to get. So I guess I'm unluckily lucky.
Absolutely. And you know how much of a fan I am of kind of positive psychology and the happiness literature as you are as well. And, we certainly don't want cancer. That's for damn sure.
Absolutely.
But life is not always full of positivity and happiness. And that's what allows us to actually feel happy is these challenging times in our lives. And look, if there's anybody that's been through challenging times and kind of come out the other end, it's you. And, you've been such an inspiration to me. And kind of before we get into that, let's kind of maybe take a step back. Why don't you share with everybody who may not be familiar with you, kind of the first 18 years of your life and how you fought cancer and the 2 occurrences and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I kind of want to touch back on that you mentioned was, with my current diagnosis, you're right. Sometimes, putting it bluntly, life sucks, but there's nothing you can do about it.
Yep.
except choose how you want to react.
Absolutely.
So I could have let it hit me, and I'm sure, you know, we'll get into that with my first two cancers,
Yep.
where I could have sat there and I could have come out on the other side thinking, you know, why me, why me, why me, and felt sorry for myself. I could have felt like the victim, but
Yeah.
I chose not to. And everybody has the freedom of choice. That's one of the greatest freedoms that we have.
Yep.
You know, in any situation you're in, you have the choice on how you want to react.
100%.
So I chose to react to the second one. Obviously, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I cried. I got it out. Which there's nothing wrong with that. You know,
Nope.
everybody has emotions. We're human beings.
Yep.
You get them out.
Yep.
There's nothing wrong.
Absolutely.
So I kind of learned that from the first two cancers, and this is kind of going back to your question, most previous question.
Sure.
Is, you know, when I was well, you said my first 18 years. I'm assuming you don't want to talk about the first 9 months before I was born, because my mom and dad got together, and then 9 months later came me. So we'll flash forward to being 13 years old.
Forward. Yeah, let's flash forward.
We don't need those details. 13, I remember going up for, I was perfectly healthy. I was a normal, I grew up in Ohio, Midwest, outgoing, fun kid.
Yeah.
You know, I played soccer, I played football, I played basketball, I ran cross country, I pole vaulted, I swam, you know, I did everything. And one day I was playing basketball, just a pickup basketball game, and I could audibly hear something snap in my knee. So it kind of sounded, you know, since Thanksgiving was just passed and Christmas is coming up, the holidays are here, you know, it sounds like I was eating like a turkey leg, and you know, that the gristle and everything. That's okay. There you go. That's what my knee sounded like.
Ugh.
And I remember hobbling home from school later that day, and the next morning, every joint in my body was so swollen. I literally looked like the Pillsbury Doughboy. You know, I felt like a troll. I had to waddle around. I wasn't myself. So my mom and dad took me to the local hospital where I was born and raised in Willard, Ohio, population of 5,000 people. And initially they thought I had pneumonia, and as you already know, it was cancer. So you can't cure cancer by sucking on a nebulizer.
Right.
So they took me to Columbus, Ohio,
right.
where they started doing more tests. And then that's when they diagnosed me as a 13-year-old with advanced stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. And the crazy thing is, they told my parents, hey, your firstborn son now has 3 months to live. So
that's absolutely crazy. And you know, when I was watching True North again last night, what really struck me was something your dad said. And he said, you know, that's the worst news you ever want to get, but the last thing we're going to accept, I'm paraphrasing, of course, is that your child might pass, because they're going to end up picking up that from you. And so, you know, him and your mom said, be like, no, we're getting through this, and we're going to plow through. So
yeah, absolutely. It wasn't, hey, if this happens, we're going to do that. We're like, look, this is what we're going to do.
Exactly.
Like, we're not even going to think about dying. And one of the reasons they did that was because my step grandmother on my mom's side passed away 3 months beforehand from cancer. And obviously no blood relation at all.
Right.
And they didn't want me to associate being sick, having cancer, with death.
Sure.
So initially they didn't even tell me. They just said, Sean, you're sick. You know, you're in the hospital, but this is what we're going to do. And which also makes me wonder, why in society now are we, and doctors still do this, because I have friends, you know, everywhere around the world, and all of them, most of them do the same thing. They're like, you have cancer, and this is what we're going to do. And by the way, it's treatable. How about turning that around and telling people, hey, you have a condition, it's treatable, and this is what we're going to do. And oh, by the way, it's cancer. Because once you hear that C word, you check out. If you just turn it around and say, hey, this is what's going to happen. This is what we're going to do. These are the options. And oh, by the way, this is your diagnosis.
That's really interesting. I never thought of it that way before. I mean, I've thought of life challenges that way. I've never thought of a medical diagnosis that way. And it's kind of interesting because, you know, as many of the folk know, as you do, I'm a dentist and I work for a clinical education company. And actually that's how we train our dentists to kind of treatment plan in a different way. It's like, here's your condition. Here's what's going to happen if we don't do anything about it. I mean, it's dentistry, not cancer. And, you know, what do you think? And so it's a very similar idea, which is like, okay, here's what's going on. Here's what we're going to do about it. Oh, by the way, it's called this. So the whole idea of the label is, you're right. I mean, the minute people hear the C word, it's a whole different.
They check out.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So
totally.
that's what they did. They protected me from it, and
Yeah.
I'm sure for a good reason, because
Yeah.
a 13-year-old is very malleable and
Sure.
malleable, and my brain was just focused on being normal.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I thought, okay, it's no big deal. Let's get it done with. What do we have to do?
Sure.
So that's how I went into it.
Yeah.
And then it was a little bit different the second time when I was going in for a checkup for the first cancer. I was older, so I was almost 16.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going for a checkup, and in one day they found a tumor on an x-ray. They did a needle biopsy where they took a needle about this big and slid it past my ribs to aspirate part of the tumor.
Mm-hmm.
So they found a tumor on an x-ray, did a needle biopsy. They took out another lymph node. They put in a Hickman catheter, which is a permanent IV essentially. Mm-hmm. They did a thoracotomy where they cracked open my ribs, removed the tumor, put in a drainage tube, and started chemotherapy in less than 1 day.
Oof.
So this time around, they diagnosed me with a type of cancer that affects 3 out of 1 million people with a prognosis of 6%. So if you have 100 people with this cancer, 94 die. I'm actually the only person in the world to have ever had Hodgkin's and Aschen's sarcoma. And I did some math, and the chances of me surviving both of these illnesses is equivalent to winning the lottery 4 times in a row with the same numbers.
That's insane. I mean, I can't even put 2 and 2 together in my brain thinking about Martin as a 16-year-old. To forget about getting that diagnosis, but as a secondary cancer diagnosis, I can't even imagine that. Do you recall? I mean, obviously, I'm assuming here. You know what they say about people assume, but I'm assuming here that some of it was a blur, and some of it you remember. Do you remember at all, kind of what some of your thoughts were when that day was happening, when they were doing all these things to you at once? What was that like?
I absolutely remember that. And I remember being in the recovery room after they did the needle biopsy, because they wanted to see what it was first. And they did a wet reading on everything. So immediate results. And I remember the doctor coming into the recovery room and my mom and dad going outside. And like I said, 16 years old, as a 16-year-old, you're nosy. You want to know, I know they're talking about me.
Right.
So I grabbed my little buddy, my IV pole, and I kind of waddled over there and just listened in. My dad was having the chit chat, the casual chit chat. Hey, how's your day? My mom was like, is it cancer or not?
Right.
She jumped right in there. And
she's like, tell me.
Yeah. She's like, I need to take care of my little baby.
Yeah.
And the doctor said it was cancer. And I remember distinctly, because that's all I needed to hear. Yeah, I grabbed my little buddy, I waddled back to the bed, and I buried my face in the pillow and cried. Because initially I thought to myself, oh God, here we go again.
Sure.
I was just starting to come to some semblance of normalcy. And now all of a sudden I have to do this again. My life's going to go on pause. I'm going to lose my friends. I'm going to lose my hair.
Yeah.
And when I was 13, I remember being 60 pounds overweight on my hands and knees, bald from head to toe, pulling chunks of hair out of the drain, just weeping. And I also remember thinking about what my friends were doing that same day when I was getting ready for school. Like I said, I just described myself. I thought, okay, well, Jerry, across the street, 2 houses down, he's getting ready for school with a completely different perspective.
Yeah.
He's worried about hairstyles. He's worried about being popular. He's worried about the Reebok pump. It was probably like 29, 30, 31, perfect pump. I'm on the bottom of the shower floor, contemplating life as a 13-year-old. All I wanted to do was be normal. Yeah. So the second time around, I remember thinking to myself, well, God, here we go again. So that lasted for a while. And then, believe it or not, when I went in for the treatments, the second time I had 3 months of intense chemo, 1 month of intense radiation, and then 10 more months of chemotherapy. And every time I was in the hospital, because the treatments were so harsh, they knocked me out. So when I was 16 years old, I was placed in a medically induced coma for nearly a year. I don't remember most of it, but what's crazy is, everywhere I go now, I do my best to visit hospitals and share my survivorship story with the patients. And even when you're in a coma, your brain's still recording information.
Sure.
So I'll be somewhere and I'll smell saline solution And all of a sudden, bam, I'll get this memory that just comes flooding back. And I'll look at somebody like, I got to go.
Wow. So well, it's been stated that smell is one of our most potent memory
Right,
joggers
exactly.
there is. And so to have that visceral experience, that emotional reaction to a smell without even necessarily the associated memory, it's the emotional memory while you're there to help other fellow human beings is, so many people might do that once and then run the other way, but that's not what you've done. You've, in that moment in time, as you describe, it's like, look, I got to go, but you keep coming back. You keep coming back for people, which is just one of the most inspiring things about you. And so I know, so you were in the coma, and then obviously you came out of that coma, obviously. And then
unless I'm still there and this is all a dream.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm kidding.
No, well, we would certainly hope not. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And
we're not gonna go into the Matrix.
Yeah. I mean, look, we're laughing about this now, but I think that's kind of the point. That's one of the reasons why I kind of gravitated to you the minute we met, and one of the huge reasons why you're on with us today. And thank you again. It's because of your outlook, and it's because of the fact that you don't. I mean, you go through and you go through the emotions as we should do as human beings, and be vulnerable and cry when stuff happens, but you always end up picking yourself up and kind of moving forward from there to help other people. And that's what you've dedicated your life to do. And so, after you ended up coming out of that second round, talk to us about how it ended up morphing today in terms of dedicating your life to helping others, which you do with such grace and humor.
I appreciate that. I'm stumbling over my words. I'm also a professional keynote speaker, and I'm having a hard time getting them out. I appreciate that. And, it does mean a lot knowing that my life is helping other people, because I see life differently.
Mm-hmm.
After high school, I went to college. I turned into Belushi from Animal House.
Mm-hmm.
I had $100,000 party. I had a fantastic time.
Right.
Went to grad school. And while I was working on my master's and my doctorate in counseling psychology, I wanted to be a psycho-oncologist, a psychologist for cancer patients. And that was the first time I realized that my whole life I was dragging around this bag and the bag of issues. Not once did I have the time, or did I take the time, I should say, not once did I take the time to look in the mirror and ask myself, who are you? What do you want? And that's when I realized I still had a bunch of baggage from the 2 cancers, and I couldn't help anybody else until I helped myself.
Sure. Absolutely.
So then I realized, okay, well, I've been given a gift of the mind-body connection, because everything I've seen and everything I've believed has come to fruition. Obviously, it's not like I'm going to go sit in the corner and wish and pray and hope things happen. No, I'm putting it forth the effort.
Yeah.
But I realized that because of that connection, I could make a lot of things and a lot of tremendous things happen. And I wanted to reach back into the cancer community, which now seems like it's a global epidemic. It's like the whole world knows somebody touched by cancer.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be the first cancer survivor to climb Mount Everest. I thought, what better platform to scream hope than literally the highest platform in the world?
Yeah.
So I did that when I was 27, and then I went and climbed, as you mentioned in the intro, climbed the highest mountain on every continent, skied to both poles, Hawaii Ironman. But one of the things that really keeps me grounded is on Everest, I took a flag that was about this big that had names of people touched by cancer. And Everest was the first mountain I climbed. And if anybody's thinking of climbing Everest, I do not recommend starting with Everest. Start with something a little smaller. So I was
good advice. Thank you for that. I'll make a note.
Yeah. But I take a group up Kilimanjaro every year as a fundraiser for my cancer charity. So anybody can start with that. Yeah. And our success rate is 98% as opposed to the normal 48%. We do things differently.
Oh, that's cool.
So I started with Everest with a flag of names of people touched by cancer. And on the bottom of every flag, I did that for all the 7 summits as well. It always said, dedicated to all those affected by cancer in this small world, keep climbing. So then it kind of culminated at the North Pole, which was the last of the Explorers Grand Slam,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, the 7 summits and the 2 poles.
Yeah.
And that was completely emotional as well. I just want to continue pushing myself and continue showing people that limitations are in the mind, and limitations are only what you believe them to be. And people need to realize that, you are your greatest cheerleader, you are your best asset, but you're also your worst enemy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, in my own coaching practice, both for spirit education and as well as privately, it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what you do in life. We all have this inner talk track that really guides our interactions. And I told you I was going to tell you a story about you, and I was going to do it on camera. And
I'm kind of nervous about this.
no, this is when I knew we were going to be friends, and this is when I knew truly and really actually there were two, come to think of it, that I truly understood what an amazing human being you are. So we're sitting there. It was like day 2 of course number 2. We called them mods. And you and I kind of talked a little bit the day before, because you're such a kind of chill guy, and you were all interested in me. You were like, oh, what do you do, etc. Oh, I'm a speaker too. Da 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 da. And then I shared with you that I was going to speak at this keynote address and talk about my friend who climbed Mount Everest. And you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's kind of a club. I did that too. I'm like, oh, really? Like, I know 2 people that climb Mount Everest. That's wild. So we're chit-chatting. And then the next morning, you sit down next to me and you go, hey, I got a gift for you. And you were like so nonchalant about it. And like, picture this, we're seated and you're on my left. I'll never forget this. And you were kind of looking at me, but kind of not. And you're like, I brought you a copy of my book. And I said, oh, that's very kind of you. But then you like slap me across the face and you go, you know why? He goes, I want you to go ahead and read this because you've been through enough in your life. The only person that's really holding you back is yourself. And I just want you to believe that. And then you just kind of stopped. And I didn't even know what to say at the time. And I was like, holy smokes. And so whenever I have a challenging time in my life, it's like, I always think of you, honest to goodness, because I think to myself, well, shoot, if Sean's been through what Sean's been through and come out the other end, who the heck am I to be complaining about X, Y, or Z? And so the gifts you've given to the world and the hope that you've brought to the world, and with all the cancer patients and your climbing, it's amazing. And I'm going to save the second story for a second segment, but so I want to thank you for that, because it really made a significant impact on my life. And
well, I had no idea, and I'm deeply touched by that. So
yeah.
I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah.
But never, and I say this with utmost respect, never compare yourself to someone else.
True. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Your struggle, anybody else's struggle, is completely unique to them. People say, they call me all the time, and I ask them, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm kind of down. I'm kind of sick. I got a cold. And all of a sudden they say, well, look who I'm talking to. But your Everest is different than my Everest. My Everest was literally Mount Everest. Somebody else's Everest could be walking around the block.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's real to every single person who has issues.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why you kind of hit the nail on the head. That's one of the reasons why I'm even doing this YouTube thing, because, however many people we, meaning myself and my wonderful guests, can touch, that's a good day, because it's not necessarily for the point of comparison, but for the point of inspiration and for the point of hope, and kind of being able to lift us up to a place that brings us greater levels of happiness, contentment, and joy. And
Absolutely. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's really the whole point of this. I mean, whether 200, 2,000, or 2 million people see this, it at the end of the day, and I know I've heard you say this too, like if you can impact like even one person, it makes it worthwhile, right? So
absolutely.
So, tell us a little bit about kind of where you are now, because our next segment that we'll get to, we're going to kind of dig deeper into like what you're doing, and kind of you and I talk, kind of coach talk, and have a good time there to kind of help people with specific skills and just kind of the whole topic of mindset. But kind of share with everybody kind of you're a professional speaker now, and you have the Kilimanjaro trip, and you you have dedicated your life to helping others. So talk to us a little bit about kind of what you're engaged with, because you're engaged with a number of things. So
Yeah, absolutely. So where do I even start with this? Because everyone always asks, well, what do you do? And I say, well, I'm a speaker, I'm a climber, I'm an author, I'm an adventurer, and I run a nonprofit for kids with cancer.
Right.
And like, oh yeah, you're not busy. Wow. I would say that the biggest thing I'm working on right now is a program. But I also signed another contract to write another book. I'll send you a new copy.
Okay.
We're playing with the title right now.
Okay.
But I think it's called it's the 7 Summits to Success. My plan is to have 7 different books.
Love it.
And then put them together like smaller books. But kind of have an emotional, fun story going through there, and then like the last 5%, like the dummies how-to guide.
Yes,
like, this is what Sean did, and these are the embedded stories within, or these are the embedded lessons in the story.
Love it.
So it's going to be 7 Summits to Success: How to Climb Your Own Everest.
Love it.
So we're pretty excited about that. The film, as you said, came out a couple years ago. I'm working on working with the Survivors Net. They want me to do a couple bookends on movies for them, like intro and an outro. Keynote speaking. I'm doing a lot of online stuff now because of the vid.
Yes.
And in-person stuff hopefully will pick up soon. I love doing keynote presentations for very large corporations. So that's always been a blast.
Absolutely.
But the biggest thing too, 2 big things. One is the Summit Challenge, which I think we'll get into a little bit later. But then the second one is I'm still looking for people every year to go up Kilimanjaro. Like I said, I've been up Kilimanjaro now 20 times. And my wife, I got married last year, 2 years ago now. So it'll be 2 years coming up. She actually has an organization or a company called Origins Accessories, which has women's accessories. And I've learned more about women's accessories in the past 6 months than I thought I would my entire life. So I can tell you what a difference between a bangle and a bracelet, whatever. But with each purchase, it supports an orphanage in Africa next to at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro. So this year, she actually fed, I want to say, almost 100 orphans for an entire year with her sales.
That's incredible.
Just constantly giving back and helping people understand that, the more you give, the more you get. The more you help people, the more difference you make in the world, the better.
Absolutely.
And I remember being on a plane flying I was connecting in Hong Kong. So I was giving a presentation in Mumbai in India. And I got bumped up to first because of all my miles. I have over 1 million on American. And the guy I was sitting next to, he took that flight from Dallas to Hong Kong once every other week.
Oof.
So he was multi-millionaire, if not billionaire. I don't know why he wasn't flying. He was taking his own plane.
Right.
But we were just talking back and forth, and I kept asking him questions. How are your kids doing, or your family? I got to know him pretty well.
Right.
And he told me, well, I missed my kids' first words. I missed him walking. I missed him, hitting off the tee for T-ball. And he kept going off. And I was like, okay, well, how much money do you need?
Yep.
You're set. He's like, well, it's just what I do. I'm like, well, what about your family?
Yeah.
And then I finally asked him a question. I was like, have you fulfilled your life's purpose? And this is kind of going back to your original question. Have you fulfilled your life's purpose? And I immediately followed up and I asked him, are you still alive?
Wow.
So then he stopped. And then when we landed, he looked at me and he goes, you convinced me to quit my job. This is my last trip to Hong Kong. I'll spend the rest of my time with my family.
Wow. That's amazing.
So I don't know if that's good. I don't know if he lost, his 3 houses or whatever, but he's spending more time with his family.
Well, you got to assume if he's been doing that trip every other week that he's probably smart enough to figure out whether he
I'm sure.
can retire or not.
Yeah.
So, well, I think that's an amazing story. And our next segment, we're going to kind of go into a little bit more of the mindset stuff. I wanted to kind of have the viewers get to know you just a little bit, understand your story, realize why you were voted one of the 8 most inspirational people in history, because it's certainly well deserved. And I love your comment around everybody has their own perspective and the whole comparison thing, and it is so true. And I don't know if you've had this experience. When you end up coaching somebody and you kind of help them work through something. And as we were trained not to get into their bag, as the phrase was, or their issue box, tissue box, you know, there's a couple different catchy ways to do it. It does give you that perspective, right? It gives you that perspective relative to, you know, everybody's going through their own stuff, and it doesn't matter what that stuff is, because for everybody, as you said, that's their personal Everest. And so,
Absolutely.
you know, it's any additional thoughts that you have for people about kind of overcoming their own personal Everest before we go into our next segment?
I do, and I think I learned it from my parents when I was a little kid and I was swimming. And they always taught me, and I talk about this all the time in my keynote presentations, that I never had to be the best. I had to be my best.
Yep.
And I think that really helped, knowing that if I just improved myself tomorrow a little bit better than I was today, and then tomorrow, the next day, a little bit more than I was the other day, utilizing the compound effect, it really makes a tremendous difference in someone's life. Absolutely. But if you're constantly comparing yourself to others, you're going to end up going after other people's goals, as opposed to what you value most. Absolutely. And if you're focused on being the best you can be, everything's going to be fine. You're comparing yourself to a standard that you can constantly improve.
Absolutely.
I'm in Puerto Rico now with my wife. She's born and raised Puerto Rican. And I could actually say yo soy boricua, meaning I'm Puerto Rican as well, because I married one of the people from here. But I was at the North Pole when I called her on my satellite phone. She was hanging out down here. I think there was 100 to 200 degree temperature difference. Oof. And that's where I actually asked her to marry me, at the North Pole.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That, you know, having watched True North again before we kind of jumped on this interview, you know, I was really watching you when you hit that North Pole and you were pushing the sled with the flag of hope, with all the names on it that Vern Yip designed for you. I was watching your face and the emotion that just kind of washed over you, particularly from my perspective, as you were laying out the flag. And then as you started pushing it toward the pole. And, you know, we met each other, 5-6 years ago, whatever it was, in our coaching training. And, you know, I had given you a couple names of my family, and my mother and my brother are both survivors. And then I gave you the name of my aunt. And, you know, we'll text here and there. It's not like it's all the time. And I know you're a busy guy, and like me too, you know, you text and like a couple days later, you get a response. And, you know, I texted you one day and I said, hey, listen, I said, my aunt, whose name is on your flag, just got re-diagnosed again. And within 2 minutes, like no joke, you text me back a picture of the name of my aunt on the flag. And I can't even tell you how much that meant to me, because, I mean, I knew her name was on the flag, but the level of care that you exhibited just to be like Johnny on the spot when you had all this other stuff going on, because this was before you left. This was like right before you left, was just absolutely amazing. And to see your face as you pushed the sled and as you reached the pole was just extraordinary. And, you know, what was going through your mind when you kind of hit that point, or pole, as you will?
The pole, yeah. I think a couple things were going through my mind. One, obviously, you know, I was super happy I was getting out of the 80-degree temperatures. Two, the day before, I had a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue that they actually engraved. It said Sean Swarner, True North, best served on ice.
Nice.
So I had it in my sled and I was pulling it up there. I checked it the night before and it was so cold, the whiskey was frozen.
Oof.
So I took hand warmers and I stuck them on there and stuck the bottle in a sock. So another thought through my mind was, I hope it melted. Like, I hope my alcohol thawed out. That's hysterical. The other questions, and these are in completely random order.
Of course.
Another one was, you know, what am I going to do next? And I think the biggest one was I didn't want to disappoint anyone who was on that flag. So kind of going back to your aunt, you know, having values and knowing what your personal core values are really, really keeps you in tune with who you want to become.
Absolutely.
And I think I was thinking about all my values of why I was up there, why I was battling 80 below temperatures.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't for me to prove to myself I can walk away with all my 10 fingers and toes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Maybe in a selfish way, I do all this stuff because I still want to prove to myself I'm still alive
Mm-hmm.
because of what I've been handed in the past. But the number one reason is seriously to inspire other people and encourage them to go after their own limiting beliefs that they
Absolutely.
think are holding them back.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we talked a little bit about that in our last segment. So if the viewers haven't seen it, I recommend going back and looking at it. And one of the things you said at the end of last segment had to do with the idea of like taking little steps every day. And so, if we use the analogy of like training for the North Pole, it's not like you just like decided I'm going to go to the North Pole and booked your ticket and left a week later.
Right.
You were training and you were dragging tires around the neighborhood and up hills and all that kind of stuff. And I love that you said that, because all the time, I talk about this paper from physics of all things that talks about dominoes. It's from 1983 from Dr. Whitehead. And it says a domino knocks down a subsequent domino 50% larger in succession. So you literally could start with a domino and knock down the Empire State Building. And so, as coaches, you get this window into people. And so often, I believe that's what people miss. They miss the fact that, they have these limiting beliefs about things, and all you got to do is start.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start, it kind of leads on. And so talk to us a little bit about not only just that concept, but even your journey, related to the North Pole and how you started and how that can lead to bigger things just by putting your thoughts aside and just doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so many people get overwhelmed by waking up in the morning and thinking,
Yep.
Oh, I need to do this. I need to do this. You have a 1,000 things on your to-do list.
Yep.
But you just start with one.
Yep.
That's all it takes. If I went to go climb Everest and I looked at the entire mountain, I would have been overwhelmed.
Yep.
But I knew we were going to break it down from this camp to this camp, this camp to this camp, going to the North Pole. We had 100 miles in the middle of nowhere. Yep. Where the ice is cracking open and we had to go around these open leads. And if you didn't, and if you weren't careful, you'd fall in and you'd die. There's no way you would survive by falling in the Arctic Ocean and being pulled out in 80 below temperatures. The ice would instantly freeze, or the water would instantly freeze on your clothes.
Yeah.
So it's not, hey, I need to go 100 miles. Hey, it's I have to go 10 miles today.
Yep. Yep.
Or I have to go 5 miles today.
Yep.
And I'm a big believer in challenges. Mm-hmm. I'm doing one for this week or this month, and it's 100 push-ups and 100 sit-ups, crunches every day. Mm-hmm. Right? If I do that every day, by the end of the month, there's 3,000 push-ups.
Yep. Exactly.
You could even do 50. Mm-hmm. Let's say you do 50 push-ups a day. Do 25 in the morning, 25 before you go to bed. It literally takes 2 minutes.
Yeah.
By the end of the month, you've done 1,500 push-ups.
Exactly.
It's called the compound effect. Something little over and over and over. Another perfect example that a lot of people probably have heard is: Would you like to have $1 million now all at once, or a penny that doubles every day?
Yes, that's one of my favorites because people don't understand the compounding effect at all.
Yeah. And it's in like you said with the analogy of the 50% more dominoes. The day before you get that $1 million, it's 500,000. Then it doubles. Then it's 1 million, and then it's 2 million, 4 million, 8 million, 16 million.
Absolutely. It's funny. I just kind of thought of. I'm a big fan of The Miracle Morning, the book, and I have my morning routine, and I'm kind of known. Well, my friends know me as like this avid book reader, and you know how many times people ask me, "How do you find time to read all these books?" And I look at them and I go, "I read 10 minutes a day."
Yeah, exactly.
Literally, no joke. Now, granted, on the weekends, half the time I'll pick up a book because I want to, but truly, I read 10 minutes a day, and I don't judge myself that I didn't finish a chapter. I'm happy that I did something, and so let's kind of talk a little bit about that, because so many times, people will look at others in judgment. We talked about that last time, like don't compare yourself to others. But we all tend to do that as human beings. And we're like, well, he did this, that's him, So when you're first talking to somebody that kind of feels challenged about how to get to the next place, like you talked about the idea of just, getting started and doing that one thing, but what are some of the things that you've observed over the years that kind of stops people from even taking that first step?
Honestly, I think what stops them the most is the fact that they don't believe that they can do it.
Okay.
I think they get in their own way. And I think it's been programmed in their brains because, and I talk about this in my program, the Summit Challenge, as I mentioned before.
Yeah.
People wake up in the morning. You said you have your routine.
Yep.
Other people wake up and they either check social media or their email before they go to the bathroom or while they're going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the two.
What people do.
So, yes. So my suggestion is start your day within 30 minutes. Google inspirational video. One that means most to you. And everybody posts garbage all over social media. Good stuff, bad stuff, whatever. It's it's everything.
Yeah.
But how many people, when they post something that's an inspirational quote or a video or whatever, what percentage do you think actually follows through with what that suggests or what that says?
Exactly.
Everybody likes it, thumbs up, fantastic. Oh, 100%, whatever. And then they move on to the next thing.
Absolutely.
Unless you take action, nothing's going to happen.
That's right. That's right.
Just change one little thing in the morning.
Yeah. And the research is so clear. I should send you this paper. I gotta take a look at my files. They determine that those individuals that look at neutral or negative news or social media feeds, and that would include like the less than stuff, like, oh geez, somebody's in Tahiti. Oh, I gotta go to work today. Those individuals travel. Remember that? So those individuals that look at that neutral or negative stuff are 27% more likely at the end of the day to report having a bad day, despite not reporting anything negative that necessarily happened during the day. It's nuts, right? And so I couldn't agree with you more. Like, have a routine. Starting out, it's not fluff. The research is clear. You start out with something that's of gratitude or inspirational. It starts to reprogram your brain. And so it just becomes so important to really pick up those habits so that you end up, benefiting. I mentioned this a whole bunch of times before. The main reason why I started these conversations was to overcome my own fears, was to overcome my own limiting beliefs. Like, nobody's going to want to listen to what I have to say. I'm not going to get any viewers, blah, blah, blah. And that's not even why I'm doing it. But I was like, no. I'm going to do this. And if we talked about this last time, we can help even one person. Well, you know what? That's a good day. That's a good day.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about kind of your 7 Summits project and kind of how you really help people, because people really do look for the nuts and bolts stuff, because they do give the thumbs up. Oh, did you ever see that meme one time where it said, it was something like, how many people want change? And everybody raises their hand. And then he says, how many people are willing to change? And nobody raises their hand. So let's talk a little bit about the 7 Summits and kind of what you're doing to kind of help people figure out what that next step is.
Yeah, for sure. It's let me preface it by saying, I remember talking to my manager, my agent, who helps me with keynote speaking and everything, and bookings and contracts and everything. I remember I was telling him about the program, and I wanted it to go to initially corporations, so they could purchase it for their employees.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden he says, well, what about the corporations who, because I told him, look, corporations need to understand that their employees are people. And if you invest in the person, that comes back to you in the employee, and it helps with the corporate mindset and everything. And he said, well, what if those corporations don't believe that? How are you going to convince them? Like, I don't want to convince them. I don't want to work with people like that. Exactly. So the Summit Challenge is for people who want to change, but they just don't know where. They don't know how to begin. They don't know how to take that first step, which is probably most people. Or they're afraid to take that first step because they're thinking to themselves, oh, I'm overwhelmed by everything. Where do I even go from here? So like I said, it's called the Summit Challenge, and it's broken down into 7 different parts. Each challenge is 3 weeks long.
Okay.
which is how long whoever they are,
Yeah.
say it takes to develop a habit, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
So in each challenge, there are 3 micro challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So once you complete challenge 1, you move on to challenge 2.
Okay.
Challenge 1, this is now a new habit. You
Mm-hmm.
continue doing that habit into challenge 2. You finish challenge 2, you move on to challenge 3. You now have 2 positive habits.
Yep. Yep.
You move on to challenge 4, etc. So at the end of it, you're going to have 7 positive new habits. And research has shown the best way to replace a negative habit, or best way to get rid of a negative habit, is to replace it with a new positive one.
Exactly.
So this is
Exactly.
helping people with their mindsets. So the first thing is the bookend challenge, where you have to understand, you basically reprogram your brain through neuroplasticity, and you're growing more synaptic connections in your left prefrontal cortex, which
Mm-hmm.
is associated to optimism, openness, and
Mm-hmm.
possibilities.
Yep.
Then you move on to vivid visualization, where I help people walk through picturing themselves actually doing their event,
Mm-hmm.
actually being successful, because that way you're becoming who you want to become in the future, but you're acting like that person now.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
then the third one, it works in mindfulness and the compound effect. I've seen those 2 separate before, but
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen anyone put them together. So I've put together the mindfulness and the compound effect. So first of all, understand what mindfulness is and realize that you have a choice. And we talked about this earlier. You have a
Mm-hmm.
choice in how you want to react.
Yep.
And you can react any way. I'm not saying that, we're going to live in a world where everyone farts cotton candy,
Right.
and unicorns exist. That's
Right.
just not the case. So just be mindful of what you're doing in your life, how things are affecting you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you move on to the compound effect and notice how those things are starting to change your life. Then you
Absolutely.
move on to the Gales, which I'm sure you know
Mm-hmm.
all
Yes.
about. And
Yes.
then it's reassessing your personal core values, because the
Yep.
whole underlying
Absolutely.
idea is
Absolutely.
knowing what your personal core values are and making decisions based on what means most to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned the Gale. So that's something we were trained on in our IPEC coaching, talk about gremlins, assumptions, interpretations, and limiting beliefs. And for my viewers out there, remember my gremlin, my green gremlin? There he is. He's always there reminding me not to listen to him. So I love the fact that you developed this, because we need everybody needs tools out there, and oftentimes people talk about books as an example, like let's just call it categorically what people tend to call it, like motivational self-help, whatever. And there's 1,500 some odd books a year. My personal opinion, why that is? Because every author speaks to different people differently. And so I love the fact that you're combining the mindfulness and the compound effect, because that's going to speak to people differently, to give them kind of a way out to kind of move forward from there. So I think
Right.
that's fantastic. So
And
I really, yeah.
Oh, sorry. And it's not just a program where people say, hey, I'm going to, do you want to make $1 million in 30 months? This
Right.
isn't, I want to lose 15 pounds for a wedding type of thing and then go back to eating cake every day. This is a lifestyle diet change.
Exactly.
If people want to change their lives, this is it. And it's also taken from what I did when my first goal was to crawl literally 8 feet from the hospital bed to the toilet, so I wouldn't soil the sheets when I was going through my 2 cancers. And then I went and climbed the highest mountains in the world, and went on to do things that no one's ever done before.
Absolutely.
So it's not just, you're not learning from someone who just made a book. You're learning from someone who's actually been there. I turned something horrible into something amazing. And everybody's going through the vid right now. If you're not mindful of what you're doing, you're going to come out on the other side worse off than you were when you went in.
That's exactly right. Like, so many people during the pandemic were taking the opportunity, just as one example, to kind of reorganize all their closets and their drawers and so forth, trying to make something, positive out of this kind of horrific experience, just kind of one step at a time. So I think that's absolutely amazing. And, I really wanted to spend this session with you talking about the specifics and what people could do next, and the project you're working on, because I'm really excited about it. I'm excited to kind of jump into it myself, frankly. And so, as you think about our last 2 sessions together, any closing thoughts for people as we kind of wrap up our time today?
I guess the closing thought would just be, pay attention to what you're doing, because we are creatures of habit.
Yep.
And if you want to change who you are and you want to change what you have, change what you do.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. I couldn't think of a better way to end. So Sean, thank you so very much again for joining us today. I'll post Sean's information below. And please don't forget to subscribe and click notifications. And lastly, remember, life speaks to you. And if you think it doesn't, you're not listening. Take care, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.